Hey there, Ryan the Ride Mechanic here. Wanted to bring up and go over a quick video and start talking about ride reliability, basically.
Now get ready. Here we go.
I know what's going on right now with a lot of rides out there and some of the big name manufacturers. People ask the question, why don't some of the manufacturers stand behind their rides and make them more reliable? And that's an interesting question because the manufacturer was there to build the ride and make it work and turn it over to the customer. They are not there to continually improve that ride. Once they pass about a year of ownership of that ride, it's hands off on their point of view. They're done with it. They don't have anything left to do. They will continue to support it. They will continue to provide engineering for it, but it is not the manufacturer's responsibility for making it better. Now, most every manufacturer has a after-sales department that deals with improvements. They pretty much do it for every manufacturer. You say, well, we have this old style train, and they say, well, we offer a new one now. We say we have these old restraints that we put a lot of time and effort into, and they don't work the best maintenance-wise. We have a lot of issues and adjustment problems with them. The manufacturer come back and say, well, we have new ones. We have gas restraint style shocks that you could put in there to get rid of the old mechanical locking style. We have new control system to monitor them. We have all this new stuff. But it's not the manufacturer's area to say, here it is, this will make your ride run better. That is up to the park. So once the manufacturer delivers the ride after they've made it, and they get it up and running, and they get it running reliably within reason, they're done with it. So you would say, well, what's within reason? When they turn a ride over to a park and they say, well, you have to do all this maintenance to it, if the park within that time period of it's usually about a year, if within that year the park is seeing failures, they say, hey, we're having all sorts of issues with this particular thing, then the manufacturer steps back in and they say, well, let's look at it. Let's look and see what's going on. Let's try to resolve this. Let's see if we can update something or get it to work better. We had that particular problem with one ride where we got it in there and we were going through road wheels. We went through a road wheel almost one a day. And it was like, this isn't right. We should be going through road wheels maybe a season, a season of operation. Like, why are we going through road wheels one a day? This doesn't make sense. So in the immediate step, the manufacturer sent us a ton of road wheels. And they said, here was all these road wheels. And then they started asking for information, measurements, all sorts of stuff, and we tried to figure out why these road wheels were going bad so fast, and they were always failing the same way. Well, it turned out to be an unforeseen mechanical adjustment on the train that was causing the road wheels to go bad so fast. That ride that I was talking about, it was a prototype ride. So prototypes are that way. There's things they said this should work, but it doesn't for some reason. And that was actually, once we figured out what it was, off my suggestion, yay! But once we figured out what it was, the manufacturer built new components to go back in the train that solved the problem. And then that made those wheels started lasting a full season and a half after that. It wasn't a big deal. So that's those little things that make the rides a little bit more reliable. But then 2 years after that, once they were done with the initial warranty phase of the ride, if we wanted something to improve it, that was up to us. That wasn't up to the manufacturer to come back through and say, well, we have this which will make your ride better. Here it is. They could come back through and say, we have this, it makes your ride better, but it's like, here's the cost. And then it's up to the park to put more of that money back into the ride. And a lot of times parks don't want to do that. So maintenance takes a hit for it most of the time. Maintenance says, well, it takes us X amount of hours to rehab a train, and if we invested this money into it, it would take us less time. Well, people who are familiar with time and money can say, well, less time equals more money saved, and these parts will pay for themselves in the long run. But a lot of places don't want to put that money up front and invest into it right off the bat, because it's a large capital expense, and a lot of parks sometimes don't have that money just sitting there to waste. They don't have it, so they don't want to spend the money. So what ends up happening is that the maintenance department just has to deal with it, and whatever it is, it's like, okay, that's fine. Good example of this is, let's use a manufacturer. Pretty much every manufacturer does this, so I'll call out Vekoma, not in a bad way, don't get me wrong. Vekoma, all their trains that come standard on most of their older rides were welded chassis. Lots of steel tubing put together and welded together to make the frame of the train that you sat on. And then newer rides, they started manufacturing billet chassis made out of one piece, steel, aluminum. But these one piece chassis, they didn't have welds to inspect. So they just said, hey, every 5 years, strip the paint off of these and go through a thorough dye penetrant or eddy current testing to make sure that those frames aren't cracked. And they offer that as a retrofit. It's an upgrade for your current trains. But each one of those little chassis is a lot of money per piece. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how much they were. I remember they were really expensive, but you're talking every year you have to strip those chassis down and NDT all the welds. That's a lot of time taking everything apart, and every time you take the material off the weld, paint material that is, you run the chance of damaging something or taking base material away accidentally, which could weaken everything. So it's a lot of time and money, and then paint. If you're in places like areas that are really sensitive to that sort of stuff, like California, the coast pretty much, where they look at the VOCs of paint being used, you don't want to apply paint each time because the park has to typically carry special permitting to do paint jobs and stuff like that on their vehicles. So a lot of parks in those areas send them out to an outside company that has the permitting to do that. So the manufacturer's response for liability is, as long as you get the stuff from them, they will take liability of whatever's going on as long as you maintain it properly. Now, if you get there and you say, well, we had something cracked apart and someone got injured, well, why did it crack apart? It cracked apart because the gap was too big between the guide wheels and the guide rail, and that caused the train to bounce left and right more than usual, which caused more stress in the frame, which caused it to crack. So the manufacturer can say, well, we specify the maximum tolerance between the guide wheel and the road wheel, guide wheel and the guide rail, to be 1 millimeter on each side. And when they came out and looked at the train, they said, you guys are running 5 millimeters on each side. Way too sloppy. That's when the park would say, or the manufacturer or investigator, whoever it would be, would say that you're not maintaining the equipment properly. And then at that point, the liability is off of the manufacturer, and it's now on to the park. Now the park has to deal with it because their people weren't maintaining that ride properly. But that's a whole different subject right there. So reliability on prototype rides is a very big problem because they have lots of problems, and some of them can be fixed, some of them can't. You say, well, they fixed them on this other ride. Yeah, it's because they built a whole different ride afterwards. You were given ride number 1 and it's got all these problems. Ride number 2 doesn't have those problems because they built it out of that second ride. But the first one, you're going to have to deal with a lot of those problems. So the manufacturer is not responsible for coming back and making ride number 1 exactly like ride number 2 because it would take too much money. They would have to overhaul the entire track, overhaul the entire train, and that is not what their contract specified. Their contract specified that you're going to get a running ride that was a safe ride, and that's pretty much what you got. The fact that rides after it are better is not their problem. That's not for them to go back to ride number 1 and make it just as good as ride number 7 that comes out. That is for that manufacturer's after sales team. The after sales team is there to call you up and say, hey, we've got a whole bunch of new stuff. If you spend, another $2.5–3 million, we can get your ride running a lot better and lower your maintenance and up your throughput, which is what all the parks want. Lower maintenance, more throughput. It means more people get happy. They go out in the park and buy stuff. They want to come back. They tell their friends about it. It was a great deal. Anyways, it's a short little topic, but ride reliability, not really the manufacturer's problem after sales, after that 1 year period. So it's more the park's problem. So kind of interesting topic. There's lots of little facets to dig into here, but kind of don't want to without a bunch of little specific nuances running around that most people wouldn't find interesting anyway. Anyways, I'm Ryan Ride Mechanic. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know what you think down in the comments below. And I'll try to make some more videos coming out here in the future. Have a good day. Bye.